Okay, legal structuring for your personal protection is about protecting your sovereignty, protecting your finances. We're looking here to really safeguard all of our assets, our investments, and our lives for our families. It's an aspect of family planning, and it's a way that we can mitigate against situations such as divorce, as well as optimize our tax structures. As I said, personal protection refers to these legal structures, and legal structures, and we'll dig into this, come in the forms of different types of entities. And these entities are different depending on what region you're in. If you're in the US or the UK, they've got different names. So in the US, we've got a sole proprietorship. This is existing across both the US and the UK. This is quite possibly the worst business structure, and it doesn't make sense why it even exists, because there's no real difference between being in this structure and owning all of your assets to your personal name. So under this structure, you have a business license, but all of the risk and all of the liabilities of that business are one and the same with you. So you don't have any legal protection there. And if there is a case against that business, it would come straight back to bite you in the ass. Um, in the next stage down, and this is where you start to get that first layer of protection. In the US, we've got limited liability companies. Similar to Dubai, we've got the same thing. In the UK, you refer to them as private limited companies or limited. And this is where you get two different forms. You get limited by shares and limited by guarantee. Generally, when we're looking at creating what we refer to as an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, this is an entity that is safeguarded to its liability. So it's one of these limited liability entities here, but it's not going to have any risk towards that entity. So if you own this, if there's a liability against that entity and that entity goes to court or various situations, it goes into bankruptcy, you're not personally affected. So the liability ends with the entity. Now, the layer above that is where we develop these sort of S corps in the US, or a holding company. And in the UK, this holding company could also be another limited company. There's no real jurisdiction on that. Bearing in mind, this is just a select handful of different types of vehicles. Vehicles is another interchangeable word with entity or organization that you could form. There's so many. I think there's about 8 in the UK that you can register as, but these are more tailored towards partnerships and charitable causes. Likewise, in the US is even more complicated. There's so many different variations, and they just create one to serve its purpose. And then it gets to the layer above, and this is where we're trading on the public level, where companies are required to share their accounts information. And this is the stock market, essentially. So in the UK, those are publicly listed companies. In the US, that's an Inc. or a Corp. With these entities, they come under a lot more regulatory scrutiny. There's no real reason why one would list their company public unless they were looking to raise some form of equity and they were struggling doing it privately. And then you get your trust and foundations. And these are really the secret to protecting your assets and your family planning. And essentially, the two of them are interchangeable. You can sit them on top of each other if need be, but you may have heard of a trust. A trust isn't actually an entity. The term is actually used to describe a relationship that exists between you as the beneficiary and a trustee who takes responsibility of your assets. So this is an entity or a mechanism that could protect your anonymity. It's a great way to protect your assets and not disclose what sits behind those assets. So the difference with these trusts is that you don't have direct control of your accounts. You're having to rely on these trustees, and the trustees are given a set of rules. It could be a very direct one that if you need transfers done, they'll do it. Or it could be if you had children and you were looking to establish some sort of trust fund, then they would have rules where that would be released at a certain time, maybe when they're 21 or 25, and you can set it to be done in different disbursements. A foundation holds very much the same principles as the trust, except it is a legal entity and you have your name on the account. So that you lose the anonymity aspect of everything, but you maintain a more clearer, cleaner structure. There is, depending on what types of business you're doing, there is a general adverse look at trust just because of the anonymity that sits behind them. Now, both of these vehicles are very important because they will hold your reserves. And this is where you start to look at how your structures fit together, and you don't start to live your life as a person anymore. You start to live as this holding company here. Now, the way you structure is, and we refer to these vehicles here, these limiteds or these LLCs, as SPVs, special purpose vehicles. And each one of these would own a specific asset, or however you want to structure and manage it. So you could have one that manages all of your real estate. There could be one that is more limited to assets in a single country if you've got assets across the world. One could be a business or variety of businesses. And the way this works as well is it allows you to sell off a portfolio. And if any one of these assets, if there was, let's say this business here was attacked, it's got a major lawsuit against it, none of this is attacked as well. It's completely unaffected by the situation. So all of the liability sits here, and they would not have to pay any more to the creditors other than what their share value is worth in that business. And within this, so all of these SPVs would be owned by your holding company. Here in the UAE, we have a specific business known as a holding company, but as I said, it could also be a limited company that owns them as well. And then that would be held by your trust or your foundation. Now, you want to hold all of your assets here in the trust and foundation area. And these are your hardback assets. And this is what you could refer to as your reserve and the reserve system. And this structure is something that I've worked on quite hard for myself, is to be able to function not just as an entity, but to function as a bank. Now, there's certain legal frameworks that allow some nice innovative tax structures. So let's look at when assets are held here, they could lend against those or borrow against those assets to the holding company. That holding company could invest into anything, and any profit and the returns and interest earned on that loan is completely tax-free. So you create this circular economy where you're lending into yourself. You don't need to rely on anyone else. So the idea here is that when you generate profits here, you take them up into the trust, you build up your reserve system. And this is where it gets even more interesting, is that life insurance can exist also as an asset. A lot of people take on life insurance as an aspect of family planning on the event or in the event of your death, to protect or provide some sort of endowment to your children or family members. But the real value is when you start to sit it in structures like this, where it can act as a compounding asset. So the insurance and the life insurance will continually compound every year at whatever premium you've got, but you can still borrow against it. So whilst this is compounding, you're also borrowing and making money off of that money as well at a tax-free rate. And this is really what I live by. And there's three ways to living life. There's living your life as a natural person, and this is the riskiest, most taxed, inefficient way to live your life, and it's really not serving you any purpose. The second step is to live your life as an entity, and there's clear differences here. If you're in the UK, you're on some sort of taxation structure that's dependent on what your annual income is. As a business, your taxation structure is 19%. Anything you do is tax deductible. If you're driving your car, that fuel, you can claim back that VAT. If you're going out for dinner, you can claim back that VAT. Anything that you could consider a potential business expense, you can put here and you can claim back the VAT. So there's a lot more optimization that can occur just living like this. But then the real benefit is when you can start to establish a structure like this, where you have a bank and you have the ability to lend to yourself against your reserves at no tax. For many, this is the best way to go and the easiest. In the UK, this is a structure that could be set up in 12, I think for £12. It costs to set up a business in the UK now. So that's the first step. But overall, a structure like this could set you back annually to maintain. You've got for every SPV you'll be paying an annual management on that or an annual renewal fee. So I guess that's £12 every year for every business you have. And on these structures, it's generally around $7,000. So on the trust structure. And I guess the more money you make, the more expensive these structures get as well, because you start to develop more SPVs. And sometimes you might want to have another holding company to represent something else. So there's complex tree diagrams that are created with the more you start to build this out and you have people manage it. But this is essentially the best way to protect your sovereignty, protect your wealth, and family plan to the most optimum, as well as leverage your independence. Anybody that has concerns about their own structure or wants support in structuring themselves with our team, please get in touch.